Okay, and we're live. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. For those new here, my name is Nikki. I'm an author and editor, and I post videos here on YouTube about writing, editing, reading, and all the other things I love. And it's the last one we're here for now because the end of the month is here. Well, it's gone, in fact. I'm a little bit late this month. And it's time to wrap up what I've been watching for film and TV during April. So first of all, let me get rid of this banner now. Okay, so April's been a pretty busy month for me work-wise as well, but I've still managed to watch a few things, so I will share those with you. First of all, I bought a couple of DVDs, and the first of these was Thirst, which is a Korean vampire movie. I had seen this film, I believe, a few years back, but since I'm now watching so much Korean stuff and learning Korean, I wanted to see it again, and I didn't own a copy. So I got this one, we watched it together, my husband and I. So this is a rather interesting piece. It starts off fairly slowly. It then looks like it's going to turn into some kind of weird porno before eventually we get into more of a vampire thriller storyline for the rest of the movie. I really like the acting in this piece, but as I said, the pacing is quite slow, so some people may be put off by that. But it's one of those films that does reward perseverance with those slower, earlier scenes, because the pace really picks up once things take off on the vampire side of storyline. It's one of those vampirism through virus type stories, as opposed to infected by biting or anything like that. But yeah, overall, this is an interesting piece. It's, as I said, a slightly slower, different type of vampire story than what we're used to from most of the Western movies, but it's definitely worth watching if you're a vampire fan. Sticking with vampires in many ways, I also eagerly bought, the day it released, season 2 of A Discovery of Witches. This is one that I'm not able to watch until the DVD comes out, so I've been quite pleased that both series so far have released on DVD within a month or so of them finishing airing, which is good. So as you know, I enjoyed season 1 and I am a fan of the books. And I thought season 2 continued really well and quite strongly. The period setting looked great, and I know they had Deborah Harkness, who is an historian as well as the author, involved in that. So I'm not surprised that they got the historical accuracy pretty good in terms of costuming and set and things like that. But it was a good continuation. It moved at a nice pace, and it certainly left me eager to see what they were going to do to finish off with season 3, which is apparently coming around the same time next year. So we've got a little bit of a wait for that. This is one of those shows where you need to watch them in order. You can't just pick up partway through. So if you haven't seen any yet, do start with season 1. But if you enjoyed season 1, then you'll definitely love how it's continuing in season 2. So moving on, and everything else I'm going to talk about now is from Netflix. So first of all, I watched one movie on Netflix during April, and that was the Downton Abbey movie. Look, this was okay. I liked Downton Abbey, but I did feel by the time the series ended that I'd had enough, that they'd kind of done everything to death a bit. And the same is probably true of this movie. It had its good moments. It wasn't a bad story, but it felt a little bit cliched and a little bit too much wanting to give everyone a happy ending by the end of it, if you see what I mean. So it was okay. I sat there and watched some while I was doing some crochet. So it was the kind of movie you could just sit and look up and down from, and you didn't really miss anything too important. So if you're a fan of Downton Abbey, you'll like it. But I don't think it's the absolute strongest piece. And I think that's just because it's reached a point when Downton Abbey should just end. The early seasons were great, and it's just kind of losing its spark a little bit, I think. Moving on to the only anime I watched this month, which was a Chinese one called Heaven Official's Blessings, which is season 1. I believe there is planned a season 2, but it's not available even in Chinese yet. Now, this is kind of fantasy story, I'd say. Not really wuxia, but it's about people with martial arts, or mystical martial arts cultivation, if you like, abilities and at certain points, some of them ascend to heaven, and that's what's happened to this main character. Although this is actually the third time he's ascended, he keeps getting kicked out again. So there's a bit of a issue of how long he's going to last this time. And he's sent off on a mission to investigate some sort of evil spirits that are at work, terrorizing a village and stealing brides. And in the process, he meets this young man who, it turns out, has a bit of a secret identity of his own. This is a boy love piece, and so as you can imagine, there's a bit of romance between the good guy, bad guy kind of thing. I really liked this. I think the characters were entertaining, particularly our Dark Stranger. You have to forgive me because I'm really terrible at remembering the Chinese names. So, I kind of just give them my own little monikers, like, red guy, he dresses in red, the dark character. So forgive me, but if you look up on Wikipedia, you'll find out their names. And yes, as I was saying, I really enjoyed his character in particular. And if they do a season 2, I'd definitely watch it, because it took me a few episodes to get into it, but then I did really enjoy it, particularly the dynamic between the two main male characters. And as usual, as soon as I start live streaming, I get like an itchy nose. Sorry. Moving on. So going back to English language, just very briefly, I watched Shadow and Bone season 1. So if you watch my live streams and have seen some of my book ones in the past, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of the Grishaverse books by Leigh Bardugo. So I was really excited to see this series. On the whole, I thought they did it well. There were some things that bugged me. Considering racism is already a theme through the book, I didn't know why there was the need to belabor the point with Alina's character, which is different from the book. I kind of felt that theme's already there, it's already explored, and it just felt overdoing it to slog it with another additional aspect. But there was a few other things I didn't like, but mostly they were small things. Just some changes they made that I feared would impact key moments later on in the story. And I'm like, well, if you've introduced that now, you've kind of ruined it. Mini spoiler alert, so if you haven't read the books or seen the thing, just mute me for a second. So the Darkling's name, he's not called the Darkling very much in the series. He's given a name, and he then tells Alina his Christian name, or his first name, very early on. And for me, that's going to kind of ruin the moment when he tells it to her later. But okay, you're fine. You can unmute me now if you've been muted. But just some little things like that where it wasn't a huge issue, but I just feel like it would spoil the impact of some later stuff, the fact that they brought it in so early. In contrast, one of the things I really did like was the introduction of Kaz and his crew earlier. I was a bit unsure about it before watching. I was like, well, what are they going to do with these characters in this timeline when their story doesn't really kick off until after all the Alina and the Darkling stuff's over? But as it progressed, I saw what they were doing was, some of it was new, some of it was made up, if you like, for the series. However, some of it was backstory that we do get in the books with Kaz later. And so it does kind of make sense to do that in the correct time frame. And it does introduce these characters earlier, which, if they are planning to do the entire Grishaverse as the series, to not mention them at all for one or two series, maybe 3, and then suddenly bring them in would have been a bit strange. So mentioning them earlier and introducing this to them earlier does work in that respect. And I think that will help when we get to the Six of Crows storyline. So that was good, I thought, and I think it did work really well the way they did it. So yes, overall, look, I really enjoyed it. I had a few niggles, but I thought the casting was pretty good. I mean, they kind of spent a little bit too much time perhaps with flashbacks of Mal and Alina as kids. I kind of felt once we'd seen them once, that was enough. We didn't need to keep going back to the holding hands in the field scene, which we did, 4 or 5 times, I think. It was a little bit over the top. I've never been a huge fan of Mal anyway. I find him a bit of a nondescript character. But on the whole, I thought the casting of Alina and the Darkling and some of the other key characters, Kaz, was great. And I'm excited to see what they'll do as they continue it, which I'm sure they will. So moving on, and the remaining four are essentially Korean. Oh, in fact, before I mention those, I will mention one more in English, which is one I DFN'd. I did not finish, and that is incredibly unusual for me with books and TV series. I usually will watch all the way through to the end and give things a fighting chance, because I do sometimes find books, they start off a bit slowly, but then they do pick up and are really great by the end because I've persevered with them. But I did watch episode 1 of The Irregulars, and my husband watched this with me, and we ended the first episode with both of us feeling the same way, that we were just completely unimpressed. The idea of the show really appealed to me. I kind of like Sherlock Holmes stuff, and to incorporate that with a kind of steampunk fantasy element sounded great. But when we watched it, there was nothing wrong with the effects, but the story didn't grab me. And most importantly, I found the acting awful. I just couldn't stand any of the characters. They just felt over the top with their accents, with their performances. And so I struggled to get behind them enough to care to carry on. I was like, can I really sit through more hours of watching these guys act badly? And I decided I couldn't when there was other stuff I wanted to watch, which is unusual for me, as I said. But so that's one I did not finish, which is very rare. So, I'm sure there are people out there who will enjoy it, but I've seen other reviews of it that have kind of mirrored my own feelings. So I'm obviously not the only one who felt that it was a wasted opportunity that had potential but wasn't realised very well. So, as I said, moving on now to my final 4 things I watched in April, which are all Korean dramas. So the first up was Hwarang, which is a Three Kingdoms era, so pre-Chosun, which most of the stuff I watched Chosun, but pre-Chosun era, historical piece. Not really fantasy so much, this one. More just a historical drama, loosely based on history. I mean, the Hwarang did exist, but there's not a huge amount known about them, so most of this is pretty much made up. It's absolutely chock full with K-pop stars, so if you like attractive young K-pop stars, then you'll probably find something to like in the show. This is another one. It took me a little while to get into it, maybe 3 or 4 episodes before I really started to get into the story. But by the end, I enjoyed it, and it's kind of one of those middle-of-the-road ones for me. I enjoyed it, but if I didn't watch it again in the future, it wouldn't bother me. Moving on to one I literally just finished last night. So in some ways, it's kind of a May piece, but I have decided to talk about it today since the stream was postponed due to my work commitments. So I watched most of it in April. It was only the last 3 episodes I finished in May. So this is a sci-fi time travel story. It's a fairly new one, I think from last year or so. And overall, I enjoyed it. Again, this is one of those middle-of-the-road ones for me. I liked it, found it enjoyable, but it's not one of the ones where I've rushed out wanting to buy the DVD afterwards. I think some of the problem was it became a little bit too convoluted at the end. And that's the trouble with many time travel stories, to be honest, in books and films, that they get caught up in the writing and get written to corners, and then things have to change to get them out of it. And it just makes things super complicated. And it started off simply enough, and you kind of felt you had the gist of how the time travel was working. But then probably over the last 5, maybe 6 episodes out of 16, things just started to go off on this weird tangent. At first I was confused, and I thought I was getting my head around it again. And I quite liked some of the things that were being incorporated with the different dimensions. But when it actually finished and wrapped up, both I and my husband were questioning, how did what just occurred fix everything? And how did that have this impact that's made all these changes that resulted in the sort of final result, if you like, the final ending? And it was a bit confusing, and we weren't quite sure how they'd gotten there based on what had gone before and the rules and things we've been told previously. So maybe it's one of those that you need to watch again and listen really carefully to all the explanations. But I mean, I did a tiny bit of crochet while watching some episodes, but mostly I was sitting there concentrating on it. And yet I still was questioning what on earth was going on by the last couple of episodes. So if you don't mind a little bit of plot confusion and just are willing to accept things at face value when they tell you something's happened, then it's fine. In other respects, it was good though. I liked the performances. As usual, my favourite secondary character died. I won't tell you who it was because I don't want to spoil it, but I get upset when my favourite secondary characters die, which happens quite a lot. Apparently, I just really fall for all the secondary characters all the time. But if you like time travel, sci-fi, contemporary pieces, then this is one to watch. So sticking with a contemporary piece again, I watched Navillera, which was a really, really sweet drama. And it's based on, I believe, a webcomic. And the story revolves around Hwarang is a young ballet dancer. He's kind of just launching his career. And he's talented, but he's starting to lose the drive he had when he first started to learn ballet, which he took up fairly late in life. His teacher's looking for ways to get him out of this slump when in through the door walks this 70-year-old man who wanted to do ballet as a child but was prevented by his father. And as his friends are gradually dying and he's retiring and he's just wanting to pursue the dream that he had as a child while he's still got the opportunity to do so. So he comes in and says he wants to learn ballet. And at first the teacher's dismissive and is like, well, this is a joke, you're too old. But then he decides that perhaps it would be a good experience for Hwarang if he taught him. And maybe that would help him get the spark he's missing back, because this guy, although he's older and doesn't have the physical ability to really do ballet fully, he's got the passion for it, and he's hoping that will rub off on Hwarang. So Hwarang becomes his teacher, and as the story progresses, they develop this really sweet relationship where they end up helping each other out with their problems, and finally they're both able to realise their dreams by the end of it. I mean, it's not a spoiler to say that, because it's one of those shows where they're not going to let you down with an unhappy ending. So it's a really, as I said, really sweet, heartfelt drama. And if that's your thing, and if you like ballet, it's worth watching. The guy playing Hwarang is the guy who was the lead in Sweet Home, the monster one that I mentioned, 1 or 2 months ago, I think. January, yes, looking at my list here. So it was great to see him again in a very different role, and he was wonderful. All the performances were great in this piece. So definitely check that out if you like ballet, if you like endearing, heartfelt drama. So finally, that brings us to the last one of the month, which was probably my favourite, I would say, of the Korean ones this month, and that is Tale of the Nine-Tailed. So this is another very new Korean drama. It's a fantasy piece from late 2020. And as the title suggests, this is a gumiho, a nine-tailed fox story. Unlike My Girlfriend is a Gumiho, which we watched previously. When did I watch that? Late last year, I think. In this one, it's the guy who's the gumiho and not the girl. This was a really good drama. I liked the fantasy elements. I enjoyed the relationship between our main character and his brother. It's a bit of a lost love, reincarnated storyline going on, as well as the need to defeat this sort of monster figure who appeared to have been defeated in the past when the love first died, but now he's back along with the reincarnation of the main character's first love. So it's almost like they had to repeat it, but try and get it right this time. So it's a really good tale. It's great fun, sweet, a bit of action and drama going on as well. And I really enjoyed the performance, again, by the main characters in this one. So if you like fantasy Korean drama, this is one to check out. I think that brings me to the end of my TV and film wrap-up for April, so I'll end there. Join me again in 10-15 minutes or so as soon as I'm set up, and I'll do my book wrap-up for the month as well. So I hope to see you all again very soon. Bye for now, everyone.